The mid-Michigan floods of May were devastating. They've disrupted the lives of more than 5,000 people in the 5-county area. The recovery is slow and it comes with stress. I'm Pastor David Sprang. I work with the Lutheran churches in the state of Michigan, and I live in Gladwin, and I'm part of the Flood Long-Term Recovery Group. We know it's a stressful time. Today we offer you this video as a help when the stress seems overwhelming. In addition, we'll continue to post resources on the various social media sites and web pages around the 5-county area. I introduce Dennis Potter, member of the Michigan Crisis Response Team, to help us today.
Thank you, David. And let me start by just saying I'm very sorry that I'm here today because of your flood situation, rather that we would be here today to celebrate something as opposed to mourn the loss of all the various houses and memorabilia and memories in this recovery period. So over the years, we've learned a lot about common reactions people have in the aftermath of disruptive events, critical incidents, catastrophic events, such as you have experienced in our northern counties. And these reactions sometimes seem unusual because we don't have them very often, thank goodness. But we want to reassure you that the kinds of reactions most people have in the aftermath of these things are, in fact, expected reactions to this kind of situation. So in the initial flood stage and the immediate aftermath of it, a lot of people probably were experiencing higher levels of anxiety and worry about what's happening in your property or while you were there. Heightened levels, a sense of fear, helplessness. I can't do anything about this. I've done all the precautions up to this point, and then here it is. Certainly shattered or reduced sense of personal safety or safety of your family or safety of your home. We don't want to dismiss the safety of our home as something even separate from safety, our personal safety, because we are supposed to be safe at home. We're supposed to be safe at work. We're supposed to be safe at most places where we go in our lives. And when we're not, it shatters that sense of safety. Feelings of anger in the aftermath. Anger can be at your spiritual mentor, your spiritual traditions, whatever those might be, anger at God. How can they allow this to happen to our community, to me, et cetera, my family. Loss of sense of importance then of around our spiritual traditions initially, and hopefully those have recovered, that you have been able to spend time with your spiritual community to gather together to be supportive of one another in this aftermath of combination of both the floods kind of stuff, and then of course nationally we have that COVID thing still going on, and I was telling my 17-year-old grandson the other day, you will never ever forget 2020-21, and I hope you never have to go through it again. I've lived a long time in this century, and this is my first time. I hope it's one that you will never experience again with this perfect flood of all the various things going on. And so the feelings of anger are pretty common. Again, anger perhaps at God, anger at the insurance companies, anger at FEMA, anger at who isn't here to help me now, 5 months after the floods, okay? And some of you maybe experience some sense of relief that your property perhaps wasn't as damaged as some of the others. And then at the same time, you can feel guilt that you and your family may not be going through as much as some of your neighbors. So you got that whole range of stuff. And let me also say that when we have this loss of sense of personal safety, this loss of sense of justice, this loss of sense of control, I am firmly in the belief that we grieve these losses, these intangible losses, let alone loss of a home, loss of intangible things that were in that home irreplaceable. I know if I lost my home today, and assuming that my wife and my dog got out of it, that's the only living critters, we're the only living critters in here that I care about, everything can be replaced, except for there's certain memorabilia, there's certain things. My grandmother's cookie jar, which is ugly, but it sits in our kitchen. That's irreplaceable because she only had that one when I was growing up, kind of stuff. So my point here is that I believe that we grieve these losses in the same way we grieve the loss of real tangible things and people. And that is, according to George Bonanno in a book called The Other Side of Sadness, he explains grief in a way that resonated with me when I read the book because it seemed to fit better my personal experiences of grief in my life. And that is, he talks about it being a process, and we kind of go in and out of it. And it comes and goes kind of in waves. Okay, in the immediate aftermath of the loss, the realization of the loss, the waves are pretty high and they're pretty close together. But then usually over time, the waves come down, diminish a bit, we get more time in between in which life is sort of normal. And eventually it gets back to kind of what it was before the incident, except that every once in a while, a reminder, a trigger will hit and a new wave will come and slosh over the top of us. And I would expect that to be going on in your case, even now, 5 months later, okay? That most of you are probably functioning pretty much okay. You're kind of back to where you used to be emotionally and functionally. And yet, reminder that you're not at home. You're not in your home. You're in a temporary home or you're renting, waiting for. And this period of time of recovery is far longer than any of us would hope it would be. In fact, the psychologists who have studied the aftermath of after disasters have described kind of 4 phases. In the immediate, during the event, immediately afterward, they're in what we call the heroic stage, where it's all about survival and helping our neighbors, and folks go sometimes to extraordinary lengths to rescue folks, that immediate heroic thing while it's going on. And then we enter the honeymoon phase. And in this phase, people draw together. We're going to get through this. We're going to get through this together. We're going to have Gladwin strong. We're going to have a Midland strong, that kind of an attitude where we come together and we're going to rebuild and everything's going to be just fine. And everything's going to be back to normal. And usually that lasts, 4 to 6 weeks or so until the reality hits. And the reality hits, generally speaking, when we discover how much or how little our insurance is going to cover, and the flood insurance and whatever else is out there, that it's not just a few weeks, or that the financial aid that's available to us is not enough to do everything that needs to be done in our homes and in rebuilding our community. And that disillusionment phase then also settles in around, up in your case, I'm guessing, is around the dams that failed and the legal aftermath of what all that's likely to be, unknown as to it fully, but it's still a bothersome thing, okay? And whose fault was it? And why didn't, whoever you fill in the blank, why didn't they fix it ahead of time? Why didn't they improve it? Why did we have to go through this? The other thing that happens during the disillusionment phase is, in the initial aftermath, Red Cross is there and Salvation Army is there, and these volunteers come from all over, and they are helpful in clearing debris and restringing the telephone lines and getting people, functioning back in their communities. And then when their work is done, they disappear, and you're now left with the rest of the mess. And where are the volunteers from anywhere coming in to help me rebuild my house? Where's the potential, the money for the construction, et cetera, et cetera. Also in the disillusionment phase, it's instead of in that honeymoon phase when we're all in it together, the disillusionment phase tends to be, I now need to get what I need to get. So I need to get to the construction stores, the lumber yards and so on, and get my stuff. And I'm now in competition with my neighbors for basic stuff, let alone in competition for my folks to hire contractors, competition for my folks to get my insurance monies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we tend to go a little bit more inward and perhaps are a little less community oriented in this phase. And finally, the fourth phase is the reconstruction phase. And that is, we got what we got. We're starting to able to rebuild and see things kind of returning to normal in our communities. And the communities tend to come back a bit. Now, I'm expecting in your situation, you guys are probably still in the disillusionment phase because things ain't done yet. And that's maybe drifting in some of your communities, maybe a little further ahead in terms of maybe drifting towards that reconstruction phase. But the disillusionment phase is the longest one. It takes the most time. So I would not be surprised that many of you are still kind of in that view, and that the disillusionment, when we thought we had everything we needed to have, adequate insurance, adequate dams, adequate safety inspections, you're also disillusioned in that government protection and whatever it is that we like about government or don't like about government. Okay, but we're still having a sense of loss of justice, if nothing else, around that whole element of it. So the grieving process goes on and on and on. And the difference, I think in my head anyway, between the loss of somebody that we love and the loss of these intangibles is when we lose somebody we love, we have a set of rituals that we go through. We have hopefully a celebration of their life. We have the memorial service. Family and friends are able to gather pre-COVID and eventually post-COVID. But we have the support of everyone for a while. And there's the funeral, the celebration is a kind of almost a pivot point. Not that we're done grieving and not that we aren't sad that the person is dead, but it's a recognition that now I need to learn how to live my life without this loved one in it. And when we're in a pandemic or we're in this aftermath of your floods, there's no pivot point. There's no turning that yeah, I'm here. So there's no clear thing about getting out of the disillusionment phase and into the reconstruction phase. Phew, I wish I had some magic words that I could say. I wish I had a magic wand that I could wave over your situation that would take that grief away, that would take some of that pain away, take some of that disillusionment away. And I don't. So what can you do? Well, there's some core things that you can do to kind of take care of yourself and take care of your immediate family, and some things you can do to take care of each other in the community. And there's simple things, but we often forget to do them. We're in the midst of high stress, okay? The beginning kind of starts with the old thing that all of us hate to hear, but it is, if you have a normal exercise program, this is a really good time to make sure you're still doing it, even if it has to be modified in some way. But if we have routine things that we do that gives us 20 to 30 minutes of physical exercise 3 or 4 times a week, it helps wash out the bad chemicals, the stress chemicals, adrenaline and cortisone in particular, because every time we think about the event, every time we worry about the event, our body floods with the adrenaline and cortisone. Wears our body out, wears our body down. So if we can get into, and if you don't have a regular physical exercise program, this might be a good idea to start on one. Now don't go out and try to start running a marathon by any means, but maybe some walking, maybe some extra walking if you're already walking, just a little bit more, but get things moving. Research clearly has demonstrated that one of the best things that we can do for our physical health and our mental health is to have some form of routine physical exercise. The other is trying to figure out, how do we eat maybe a little healthier for right now? Because those stress chemicals wandering around our body does things to our body that is not so good. The nourishment that we take in needs to help replenish the nourishment that is being eaten up with the stress chemicals. So trying to eat a little healthier while you're going through all of this is probably going to be important. Being careful of non-healthy ways of coping with stress, which may include overeating and overeating favorite comfort foods, opposite of eating reasonably healthy to the degree that you can, alcohol, other kind of drug use. The problem, part of the problem with alcohol, besides its obvious potential for addiction or abuse, is that when we're using alcohol, it also disrupts our REM sleep. And when we're sleeping, we go through these cycles of sleep, one of which is called Rem sleep. And that's the sleep that we heal, both kind of physically and mentally. And if we disrupt that REM sleep, we're not giving our brains a chance to heal, which means all these stress reactions we're having last longer. Okay. You might want to be careful of caffeine intake. Yeah, caffeine's a staple in my diet. And at the same time, I know now that, by noonish or early afternoon, I need to stop drinking it, because it takes about 6 hours for the caffeine to get totally out of your system, which again can be disruptive then when it comes time to try to sleep. We want to get between 6 and 8 hours of sleep, because that's what the sleep people tell us most human beings need to remain mentally and physically healthy. So to the degree that we can cope with and get to a sleep cycle similar to what we had before the floods, it's going to be helpful. So going to bed about the same time, getting up about the same time. Looking for things that, thinking back to things in our life, events in our early life that were disruptive and that were very difficult for us. Think about, what did you do back then that was helpful for you getting through it? What did people say to you? What did you do that helped you get through those difficult situations in the past? And while they may not have been floods, difficult situations have the same kind of similar reactions at different levels of intensity. So whatever you were able to do before that was reasonably healthy and got you through these kind of things, probably a good idea to try to do some of those again. Perhaps one of the biggest things that we can do, and this is not going to be easy, but one of the difficult things that can be really helpful for us in the aftermath of difficult situations, is at the end of the day, celebrate whatever successes you've had this day. Okay. And successes might be, I made it through the day. Right now, today here in Grand Rapids, where I'm out of, it's cold this morning. It's in the 40s or so. But right now, as I look out my window, the sun is shining. So at the end of the day, I can celebrate we got some sunshine today. In spite of, I managed to accomplish, okay? Because what often happens is, at the end of the day, we bemoan the things that we didn't get done today, as opposed to celebrate what we managed to get done today. And if we don't go to celebrating what we did get done and only focus on all the things on our list that didn't get done, that brings down our energy level, makes coping even more difficult. So celebrating whatever we can celebrate, okay? So some things that you can do as part of that taking care of self may also include family-oriented stuff, immediate family or extended family. And yes, I know COVID complicates it. My mother-in-law, who is a widow now for almost just over a year, lives in a retirement village. We can't go visit her there. So instead, she comes to visit us every Saturday for dinner. And we put our mask on when she comes in the house. We physically distance ourselves. She sits at our dining room table. My wife and I stand behind a peninsula in our kitchen. So we're about 8 to 10 feet apart while we're eating. Then we mask back up and sit and talk some more. That's very important for my mother-in-law to have the family time together. And it's important to my wife and I to be able to visit with her. So what are those kind of things that you might do with extended family, but with your nuclear family or whoever you're usually living with? What are things that you can sometimes find to do together that can be fun, whatever those might be? But it can be important to make sure we're trying to build in some times of normalcy and kind of fun, whatever that might be, while we are getting through that disillusionment phase and into the reconstruction phase. Lastly, some things you can do to take care of each other in terms of your circle of friends, your physical community, your neighbors, and so on. And that basically comes down to trying to be nice to one another. All of us have our certain idiosyncrasies, and trying to be tolerant of those for each other, and perhaps tolerant for ourselves, that we aren't getting through this as rapidly as we might want to. Trying to be supportive, talking with other folks who are having the same kind of struggles you're having with the insurance, with construction, with et cetera, not to get stuck there, but to talk with each other a bit about, yeah, I'm still wrestling with this. This still makes me angry, so that you can become a community of support for one another, not stuck in the event, but rather when I know that other people are wrestling with some of the same issues, it lightens my load. I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one struggling here. Okay, so that can be important. And it's oftentimes that we try to cover up anything we have going on between our ears or in our hearts. This might be a time to explore a little bit more with your neighbors and your friends and perhaps family, so that you are not holding it all inside. How much longer is it going to last? Who knows? Some reports coming out of your area indicate it could be well into next year before all of the stuff is totally fixed and back to kind of normal. And that seems like a really long time away. And it is. At the same time, if I've learned nothing else with all the gray hair that I have left, it's that when I look forward, time seems to be forever. And when I look over my shoulder, I realized the last 20 years went by really, really quick. And I say 20 years, it's much longer than that, but the 20-year mark has to do with my oldest granddaughter, who just turned 20 a few months ago. And when I look at her today as a young woman off to college, I still remember her as that little baby I held in my hands 20 years ago. And I don't know where that 20 years went. So yeah, it seems like a long way off, but in the greater scheme of things, we will get through this. You will get through this together, kind of one day at a time, a week at a time, month at a time. So in conclusion, all I can say is your recovery is probably going about as it would be expected at this time. It is slower than we want it to be. But if you think back, where were you 4 months ago emotionally and kind of at your stress levels? Is it different today? And the answer is probably yes. It's still not done, but it's probably better. And 4 months from now, it'll be better more again, because human beings are tremendously resilient and communities are tremendously resilient when we come together to move forward. I want to let you know that you will be in my thoughts and prayers going forward, and take good care of yourselves. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Dennis, for those good words. We also thank the Lutheran churches in Michigan for helping to sponsor this video. And we pray that recovery will come soon. Thank you.